A 24-year-old black girl from Riverside walked into the biggest martial arts expo in Atlanta alone, wearing taped shoes and a worn gym bag. A man with 720,000 followers tried to humiliate her in front of everyone. 8 seconds later, he was on the floor. Like and subscribe, you need to hear this one. The summer heat in Riverside, Georgia didn't ask permission. It just settled in thick, heavy, pressing down on cracked sidewalks and rusted mailboxes like it owned everything it touched. Zara Simmons had grown up in that heat. She knew how to move through it without wasting energy, the same way she knew how to move through most things in her life quietly, efficiently, without drawing attention she didn't need. She was 24 years old, and she had learned early that in Riverside, the less space you took up, the fewer problems found you. That lesson had kept her safe for a long time. But safe and alive are not always the same thing. And somewhere along the way, Zara had started to understand the difference. She wore what she always wore on her days off, a gray tank top that had been washed so many times, the fabric had gone soft as skin, black training pants with a small tear at the left knee. She'd been meaning to fix for 6 months, and a pair of white sneakers held together at the toe, with a strip of athletic tape she'd borrowed from the clinic supply room, never returned. Her gym bag was old olive green, one strap slightly darker than the other from years of sweat. She carried it over her right shoulder the same way every time, weight balanced, spine straight, a habit Mae had drilled into her at 14 and she'd never lost. She took the 715 bus from Riverside to Atlanta, sat in the third row, kept her bag on her lap, and watched the city change outside the window. Riverside disappeared. First, the tire shops and boarded storefronts, and the little church on Clement with the broken gutters Mae kept saying she'd fix. Then came the highway, and then Atlanta opened up the way. Atlanta always did like it, was showing off all glass and steel, and people moving with the particular confidence of people who believed they were exactly where they were supposed to. A.B. The Atlanta Combat Arts Invitational was held at the Peachtree Convention Center, and Zara had passed that building a dozen times in her life without ever imagining she'd walk through its front doors. She walked through them now. The registration hall smelled like chalk and leather and the specific kind of nervous energy that only exists before competition. Something between adrenaline and dread, sharp and sweet at the same time. Banners hung from the ceiling. Music thumped from somewhere she couldn't see. Fighters from across the southeast moved through the space in clusters, warming up, taking photos, signing gear for fans who'd driven hours to be here. Zara found the registration table, set her bag down, and picked up a pen. She was halfway through her form when she felt the shift in the room. Not loud, not sudden, just a change in atmosphere, the way a room changes when someone who believes they own it walks in. She didn't look up. She already knew who it was. She had known Brandon Cole was registered for this event for 3 weeks. What Brandon didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that Zara had been waiting for this exact moment for 2 years. 2 years ago, she had registered for a smaller regional tournament in Savannah. She'd paid the entry fee, packed her bag, arranged for Mae to watch her training schedule that week. 3 days before the event, she received an email her registration had been withdrawn due to incomplete credential verification. No explanation, no refund for 2 weeks. She made calls, asked questions, hit walls, and then slowly, carefully, the way Mae had taught her to track patterns, she found the thread. Brandon Cole had spoken with the tournament director, privately. The director had pulled her application. She never proved it formally. But she knew. She folded that knowledge up and put it somewhere quiet inside herself, and she trained for 2 years on the fuel of it. Brandon Cole had 720,000 followers, a camera crew, and a black and red uniform with his name embroidered across the back in gold thread. He walked into the registration hall like the floor had been waiting for his footsteps. His assistant carried his gear. His cameraman moved ahead of him, framing shots. He was laughing at something when he saw her, and the laugh didn't stop. It just changed shape. He walked toward her table. She kept writing. His hand came down flat on the form, sliding it off the table. It fell to the floor. The room went quiet, in a radius around them, the way rooms go quiet when something is about to happen and everyone senses it before it does. "You think you're in the right place?" Brandon's voice was loud enough to carry. He wasn't talking to her. He was talking to the room, to his camera, to the 7200000 people who would see this in 3 hours. "Look at this. Somebody want to tell me what this is?" Laughter. Phones raised. A circle forming. Zara looked at her form on the floor. She looked at Brandon Cole's face, the grin, the performance of it, the way his eyes moved to the camera every few seconds to confirm he was being recorded. Then she bent down, picked up the form, smoothed it against the table, and finished signing her name. "I'm here to compete," she said. Her voice was calm and flat, and took up exactly as much space as it needed to. Brandon stared at her. Then he laughed again, louder, this time for the camera. "Compete," he repeated like the word itself was a joke. "Sure, sweetheart. Sure you are." He walked away. The circle dissolved. Phones lowered. In the middle rows of the observer section, a young woman named Keisha Washington quietly stopped her camera from recording and checked the timestamp on her footage. She had everything she needed for the story she was going to write. Zara picked up her bag, found a seat in the corner, and began rewrapping her left hand. Her fingers were steady, her breathing was even. She had waited 2 years for this. She could wait one more day. Riverside, Georgia, did not look like a place where people had time to dream. It looked like a place where people had time to work and sleep if they were lucky and work again. Zara Simmons had understood this since she was old enough to understand anything. The apartment she shared with her grandmother Ruth was on the 3rd floor of a building on Clement Street that had been old when Ruth moved in 30 years ago and had only gotten older since. The elevator had been broken for 4 months. The hallway light on the 2nd floor flickered in a pattern Zara had memorized without meaning to 3 quick, 1 long, 2 quick, like it was trying to tell her something she hadn't figured out yet. The apartment itself was small and clean and full of the particular dignity that comes from people who have very little. Ruth kept the kitchen counters bare and wiped. A photograph of Zara at her high school graduation hung on the wall beside the window, slightly crooked, the frame a little too large for the print. A Bible on the nightstand. A lamp with a shade that had yellowed at the edges. A machine that beeped in the night, the dialysis monitor steady and merciless and expensive, in a way that Zara felt every single morning when her alarm went off at 5:15. Ruth Simmons was 67 years old. Her kidneys had been failing for 2 years. Quietly at first, the way serious things often begin, and then, all at once, end-stage renal disease, 3 sessions of dialysis a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 4 hours each, at the Riverside Community Dialysis Center on Morrison Avenue. Zara had sat in the waiting room of that center enough times to know which chairs had the wobbly legs and which vending machine took dollar bills without jamming. She knew the names of the nurses, the shift schedule, the cost of each session before and after insurance, the gap that insurance did not cover, and that she covered herself with the 2 paychecks that came every other Friday and disappeared, almost before she could fold them. Her first shift started at 5:30. The Riverside Community Health Clinic on Broad Street, where she worked as a medical assistant, taking vitals, drawing blood, prepping rooms, answering questions that scared people asked in voices they were trying to make sound casual. She was good at her job in the way that people are good at things they chose, not because they loved them, but because they were necessary, and she had decided that if something was necessary, she was going to do it well. She clocked in at 5:30 and clocked out at 2, and in between, she changed bandages and took blood pressure readings and told elderly patients for the 3rd time that week that yes, they did need to take the medication with food, and listened without visible impatience, because these were people who were scared and tired and doing their best in bodies that were no longer cooperating. At 3:45, she was at the Southern Star Distribution Center on the south end of Riverside, a warehouse the size of an airplane hangar that smelled like cardboard and cold air, where she loaded and scanned grocery pallets until 8 at night. The work was physical in a way that would have broken most people who sat at desks all day, but for Zara, it was almost meditative. Lift, scan, stack, move, repeat the body, doing what it knew how to do, while the mind went somewhere quieter. Todd, her shift supervisor, was not a bad man. He was just the kind of man who filled silence with noise, which meant he talked too much, laughed too loud, and occasionally said things without thinking about whether they should be said. Zara had learned to let his words pass through her, the way wind passes through a screen door. She felt them, but they didn't stay. She never complained. Not once, not to anyone, not about the hours or the ache in her lower back by Thursday, or the way her hands had developed small calluses at the base of each finger that she noticed sometimes when she was wrapping them before training. She didn't complain because Ruth had raised her alone since she was 5 years old, working 2 jobs of her own, never once suggesting that the weight was too much, never once letting Zara feel like a burden when she was, in fact, the whole reason. Ruth had given Zara everything she had. Zara was giving it back. What Ruth did not know, what Ruth had never been told directly, though Zara suspected she knew anyway, was where Zara went after 8. Not home, not right away. 3 blocks from the apartment on a side street that most GPS systems didn't bother naming, there was a building with no sign on the door. Every night before 10, Zara went there 2 hours carved out of the thin space between the end of one shift and the beginning of sleep. She had been going there for 10 years. Some debts you pay in money, some you pay in time, some you pay by becoming exactly what someone believed you could be, because they saw it before you did and never stopped seeing it, not even when you couldn't see it yourself. Those are the debts that matter most. Those are the ones Zara was still paying gladly every night in the dark, with her hands wrapped and her feet on the mat and everything else in her life set down for 1 hour at the door. Mae Greer did not find Zara the way people find things they are looking for. She found her the way you find something true, by accident. In a place you weren't expecting, doing something that made you stop and look twice. It was a Tuesday in July 10 years ago, the kind of afternoon in Riverside where the heat made the air look like it was moving even when the wind wasn't. Mae had been walking back from the hardware store on Dawson Street, a bag of light fixtures in one hand and a bottle of water she'd already finished in the other, when she turned a corner and stopped. In the vacant lot beside the old laundromat, the one that had been empty since the flood 4 years back, a girl was practicing throws, not on a partner, not on a mat. She had tied a canvas duffel bag packed tight with what looked like old clothes to the lowest branch of a scrub oak at the edge of the lot. She had her phone propped against a cracked cinder block, playing a judo instructional video, and she was watching it, backing up, watching it again, then attempting the technique against the hanging bag. Her form was wrong in 3 places Mae could see from 20 feet away. But her hip drive was not wrong. Her hip drive was the kind of thing you didn't teach. You either had it or you didn't. And this girl, thin as a reed, maybe 14, in a t-shirt with a bleach stain on the collar and shoes that had seen 2 sizes of feet before hers had it. Mae stood and watched for 10 minutes. The girl reset, rewound, tried again. Reset, rewound, tried again. Never stopped. Never looked up. Never asked for anything from anyone. Because there was no one there to ask. Mae walked to the edge of the lot. "Your left foot is too wide," she said. The girl looked up. "You're dropping your shoulder before you commit. You're telegraphing." The girl said nothing. She looked at Mae, the way kids in Riverside learn to look at adults who address them unexpectedly, measuring, careful, not quite trusting. "Fix the foot," Mae said. "Try again." The girl fixed the foot. She tried again. The technique landed cleaner. She could feel it. Zara could always feel when something clicked, that small, internal shift, when the body understood what the mind had been trying to explain. She looked at Mae. Mae nodded once and walked away. The next morning, Zara found the gym on Clement Street. She stood outside for a minute, paint peeling off the brick, a light on inside, muffled sound of someone hitting a bag, and then she pushed the door open and walked in. That was the beginning. Mae Greer was 64 years old and had spent 20 years in the United States Marine Corps, teaching hand-to-hand combat before she retired and used her savings and her pension and 2 personal loans she'd paid off. Over 7 years to open this gym? No sponsors, no grant money, no fancy equipment. Mats bags, a kettlebell rack that wobbled on the right side, and a grappling dummy she'd named Gerald that had been repaired so many times it was more tape than foam at this point. She charged nothing for the youth program. She had never charged anything for the youth program. She had funded it herself for 18 years because someone had to, and no one else was doing it. And Mae Greer was not the kind of person who waited for someone else to do the thing that needed doing. She taught Zara judo first, the throws, the groundwork, the philosophy underneath the technique, the understanding that leverage beats strength, that timing beats power, that patience beats aggression in most situations that matter. By 16, Zara had her blue belt. By 18, her black belt, certified by the United States Judo Federation, signed by Mae Greer, registered and verifiable. Then Mae added Muay Thai elbows, knees, clinch work, the striking that turned a grappler into something harder to plan for. But the thing Mae taught that no certification covered, the thing she'd learned in the Marines and never found in any instructional video, was how to read a room. How to watch a person move before they moved. To feel the intention in the body before it became action, to map the terrain of a fight before the first exchange. She called it pattern recognition. She had taught it to soldiers in conditions Zara couldn't fully imagine. She taught it to Zara in a gym on a side street in Riverside, Georgia, and Zara absorbed it the way she absorbed everything Mae gave her, completely quietly, without waste. What Mae never told Zara, and what Zara had discovered on her own, through conversations overheard and records that weren't entirely private, was that Brandon Cole had once promised a $20,000 sponsorship to Mae's youth program. 3 years ago, during a promotional event in Atlanta, he had shaken Mae's hand in front of cameras and told 3 reporters he was committed to building community in the sport. 6 weeks later, his manager sent a 1-paragraph email withdrawing the pledge. No reason given, no follow-up. 30 kids lost their equipment stipend. Mae sold her own refrigerator to keep the electricity on through winter. She never told Zara. She didn't want the anger to become the reason. She wanted the love to remain the reason. But Zara found out anyway. And she understood then that the $10,000 prize at the Atlanta Combat Arts Invitational was not the only thing worth fighting for. Brandon Cole did not just want to win. Brandon Cole wanted an audience for winning, which is a different thing entirely, and the difference mattered more than most people realized. He had built his brand, and it was a brand carefully constructed, professionally managed, algorithmically optimized on the spectacle of dominance. Not just being better than his opponents. Being visibly, publicly, entertainingly better. In ways that translated into content, into shares, into the specific kind of engagement that kept the number climbing. 720,000 followers. Brand partnerships with 3 supplement companies and a sportswear line. A YouTube channel that averaged 4 million views per month. A manager named Curtis, who had worked with 2 MMA fighters before Brandon, and understood that in the attention economy, the narrative around a fight mattered as much as the outcome of it. The video went up at 11:15 on Friday night. Brandon had recorded it in his hotel room at the Marriott. 3 blocks from the convention center, lounging back in his chair, phone angled to catch his face in the warm lamplight. He'd kept the tone casual, amused, slightly disbelieving, which was the tone that performed best with his demographic. The caption read, "Walked into the expo today and saw my next opponent. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I'm going to let you guess how long this one lasts. Hint, it's a single digit." He didn't use Zara's name. He didn't have to. The clip he attached lifted from his cameraman's footage, her face clearly visible, her worn shoes and taped gym bag and fraying hand wraps, all visible, did the work. By midnight it had 30,000 views. By 6 in the morning, 80,000. By the time Zara's alarm went off at 5:15 on Saturday, she had a half shift at the clinic before the afternoon fights. The video had been shared 11,000 times, and the comments were the kind of comments that make you understand something about human beings that you'd rather not know. What happened next was organized. Curtis had worked with a social media agency that specialized in combat sports content, 4 people in an office in Charlotte, who understood how to engineer narrative momentum. They pulled frames from the expo footage. Zara's shoes. Her bag. With the worn strap. The moment she bent to pick up her form from the floor. They assembled these into a 30-second clip, with text overlays Brandon Cole's next opponent over her shoes, a laughing emoji over the bag, and pushed it through 3 mid-tier accounts, with combined followings of 2 million, before it hit Brandon's main channel. The comment sections did the rest. Then there was Donna. Donna Reeves had worked the same warehouse shift as Zara for 14 months. They had eaten lunch at the same break room table on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Zara had covered Donna's shift twice when Donna's daughter was sick. She had thought without making too much of it that this constituted a kind of friendship, the small, practical, unglamorous friendship of people who shared difficult hours in a hard place. She was wrong. On Saturday morning, while Zara was at the clinic, Donna photographed the inside of Zara's locker. The worn spare shoes on the bottom shelf. The Tupperware container with the cracked lid. The sticky note with Ruth's dialysis schedule taped to the inside of the door. She sent the photos to an account she'd found in the comments of Brandon's original video. The account paid her $300 and published the photos within the hour. "Meet the girl who thinks she can fight," the caption read. The locker looked small in the photos, personal in a way that felt like a violation. By noon on Saturday, the post had 40,000 likes. Zara found out at 3:40 minutes before she was due to check in at the convention center for the afternoon bracket. Todd texted her not to warn her just because he thought it was funny the way Todd often thought things were funny that weren't, with a screenshot and a message. "You're famous, LOL." She read the text in the parking lot of the clinic. She looked at the photos of her locker. She understood immediately what had happened and who had done it. And she sat with that understanding for a long moment, the specific feeling of betrayal from someone you had been kind to, which is different from the feeling of betrayal from an enemy, because it involves a kind of retroactive loss, the memory of kindness becoming something that costs you. She did not cry. She did not text Donna back. She would deal with Donna later, practically and without drama. A conversation with the shift supervisor, the documented evidence, the end of something that had never been what she thought it was. That could wait. Ruth could not. She drove. She'd borrowed Mae's car for the day to the dialysis center on Morrison Avenue, went inside, sat beside Ruth for 20 minutes without saying anything. Ruth was asleep in the chair, the machine cycling beside her tubes, running the quiet indignity of what keeping her alive required. Zara watched her grandmother's face still and peaceful in sleep and felt the anger in her chest recede into something harder and more useful. Then she drove to the convention center, checked in at the registration desk, and found a corner to sit in and retape her left hand, which had come slightly loose on the drive over. Her fingers did not shake. Her breathing was even. Whatever she was feeling, she had put it somewhere it could be useful later. Mae's gym at midnight had a particular quality of silence that Zara had never found anywhere else. Not quiet. Exactly, the building on Clement Street was old enough that it breathed joists, settling pipes, ticking the occasional scratch of something small moving in the walls, but still in a way that felt chosen rather than accidental. Chosen by Mae, who had made this space over 18 years into something that held discipline the way old wood holds heat, slowly and completely. She did not come this late on ordinary nights. But the night before a fight was not an ordinary night, and Mae had texted at 9, come after 11. "I want the building empty." Zara arrived at 11:58. Mae was already there, sitting on the overturned milk crate she used as a stool. Her old laptop open on another crate in front of her, the screen casting pale light across her face. Mae was 64 years old and moved like someone 20 years younger, in everything except the moments when she chose to be still. And in those moments, she was stiller than anyone Zara had ever known. "Sit down," Mae said without looking up. Zara sat cross-legged on the mat. Mae turned the laptop toward her. 8 fights, Mae said. I pulled everyone I could find with full footage. We're going to watch all of them. They watched for 40 minutes. Mae did not need longer. She had already done the work. This was for Zara. Mae paused and rewound with a precision that suggested she had already watched these several times before Zara arrived. She spoke rarely and specifically. His left shoulder drops 2 inches before the spinning heel kick, every time. Same tell different fight 8 fights in a row. Pause. Rewind. He loads his right side, which means his left base is exposed during the rotation. He's fast, don't misread. Fast for unbeatable. Fast means the window is small. It doesn't mean the window isn't there. Pause. He's never been put on the ground. Look at this. She pulled up a grappling exchange from a fight in Raleigh, paused it on a scramble. He doesn't know what to do down here. He's guessing. His ground defense is instinct with no foundation. Nobody's ever trained him for it because nobody's ever gotten him there. She closed the laptop. The room went darker. Just the streetlight coming through the high window. Mae looked at Zara directly in the way she had. That made Zara feel like she was being read the way Mae read terrain. He fights for cameras, Mae said. You fight for family. Tomorrow, everyone in that building is going to see the difference. Zara unwrapped and rewrapped her hands, a habit when she needed to think with her body instead of her head. She was almost done when Mae said quietly, and without preamble, I need to tell you something. Zara looked up. Mae was looking at the far wall, not at her. When I was 31, Mae said I was the only black woman in a 5-person combat demonstration team at Camp Lejeune. We were selected for a joint service invitational in Virginia. I was the best technical fighter on the team. My commanding officer and I both knew it. She paused. The building settled around them. 3 days before the event, I was reassigned to a supply logistics detail. No explanation. My slot went to a man who had been training for 8 months. She paused again longer this time. Nobody said anything. I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't the hill. I spent 20 more years in the Corps telling myself things weren't the hill. She looked at Zara now. I have been training you for 10 years, she said. Not to win a fight. To do the thing I didn't do. To stand in the room and refuse to be moved. Her voice was completely level, which was how Zara knew it was costing her something to say this. Zara held that for a moment, feeling the weight of it. The years in it. The specific grief of a door that doesn't open, and the life you build in the space of that not opening. Before she left, she went back to the apartment to pick up her gear bag for the morning. The apartment was quiet. Ruth was asleep. Zara passed through the kitchen, stopped in the narrow hallway outside Ruth's door. She was reaching for her bag on the shelf when something fell from between the folded blankets Ruth's spare, kept there since the winter, and landed open on the floor at her feet. A notebook, Ruth's handwriting visible on the open page before Zara could look away. She stood very still for a moment. Then she crouched down and she read what was already in front of her, not searching for anything, just receiving what had been left, perhaps in the only way Ruth knew how to give it. Ruth's handwriting, careful and slightly cramped, since the illness. Dated 8 months ago. 1 page. Zara read it once, then again. This girl carries something I don't have a name for. It isn't talent. It isn't strength. It's refusal. Zara refuses to be erased. I pray she never learns how to stop refusing. Whatever happens to this body of mine, whatever happens next, I need her to keep refusing. That is the only thing I have ever truly needed from her. Everything else was just love. Zara closed the notebook. She set it back exactly where she'd found it. She stood in the hallway for a moment in the dark, with her hand flat against the wall and her eyes closed, and the beeping of Ruth's machine coming soft and steady from behind the closed door. Then she picked up her bag, walked out, and went to sleep. The Peachtree Convention Center on a Saturday afternoon in July was not a subtle place. 2,000 seats, every one of them filled. 300 more people standing along the back and side walls, which the fire code technically didn't allow, and which nobody was enforcing, because the organizer Cal Whitmore had decided that energy was more important than compliance today, and would spend the following week regretting that decision for unrelated reasons. The lights were hot and white overhead. The canvas smelled like chalk and anticipation. 2 local television crews had set up elevated platforms at opposite corners of the main ring. The official expo livestream was running on 4 different platforms. Simultaneously, the counter in the bottom corner of the primary feed read 18400 viewers when the first preliminary match started, and it had not stopped climbing. Brandon Cole's entrance had been designed with the specificity of someone who understood that an entrance is its own content. Custom walk-in music with a bass line that physically moved through the floor. Strobe lights cut through the house lights in alternating red and black. He came through a tunnel of black curtains at the far end of the hall, his black and red kimono with the gold-stitched name across the shoulders, hair freshly cut, hands, already taped mouthguard hooked to his collar. His camera crew walked beside him, one shooting from the left, one from a step ahead to capture his face. He raised both arms as he crossed the floor, and the section of the crowd that had come specifically for him, they had signs, printed overnight, reading number 8 seconds, in Brandon's brand font, erupted in a way that made the lighting rigs vibrate slightly. He shadowboxed at the edge of the mat, 2 spinning heel kicks, a flying knee, each one a sound like a whip crack. He pointed at the camera and winked. The announcer let the moment breathe, then raised the microphone. And her opponent, Zara Simmons. No music, no lights. She walked out from the corridor entrance in gray training pants, a white compression top. Her hands wrapped in the plain cotton wraps Mae used in training, washed so many times they'd gone soft. And her taped shoes that had been photographed and captioned and seen by 500,000 people. She moved across the floor with the same economy she moved everywhere, bag over one shoulder, eyes forward, expression containing nothing she hadn't decided to put there. She stopped at the edge of the mat, set her bag down at the corner post, and adjusted the zipper. No one watching knew what was inside that bag. No one needed to. She looked at it for 1 second the way you look at something that isn't a good luck charm, that is simply a reminder of the reason, and then she stepped onto the mat. The crowd's reaction was not unkind exactly. It was the reaction of people who had read the narrative and expected it to confirm itself. That's her. She's so small. This is going to be fast. Brandon turned to look at her. The way you turn to look at something you have already decided is not a threat. "You sure about this?" he said, not quietly, to no one in particular, in the direction of the referee. "I don't want problems when she needs the medic." The referee did not respond. He motioned them to center. They stood 3 feet apart. Brandon was broader, taller, longer in the arms, and thicker in the base, everything about him built and presented to communicate size and power. Zara stood with her weight slightly forward, shoulders, level, eyes at his feet, the way Mae had taught her. Not his face, not his eyes. His feet, where intention lives before it becomes action. The referee raised his hand. The hall went quiet, not gradually, but all at once, as though 2,000 people had made a collective decision. The hand dropped. Brandon moved first. Left foot back, weight loading to the right, his right shoulder dropping the tell Mae had identified in 8 fights across 2 years of footage. The spinning heel kick, his signature. 9 finishes. The leg came around like something mechanical and inevitable, aimed at the left side of her head. But Zara was already not where she had been. She stepped forward, and to the left, inside the arc of the kick, into the space his spinning body created, so close that the heel of his right foot passed the back of her head with 3 inches to spare. She felt the air on her neck. His momentum carried him around. The planted left leg was wide, the base broken, the core completely open for the half-second his body needed to find itself again. Mae had paused on this exact frame in that gym at midnight and said 1 second, maybe less. Zara's left hand found his collar. Her right hand locked his sleeve. She pulled him toward her sharp, sudden, a single committed movement, and swept her right leg behind his planted ankle. Osotogari the throw Mae had made her drill 10,000 times precisely because its simplicity was its deception. Nobody expected the most direct path. Everyone prepared for the complicated one. Brandon Cole left the ground. Not dramatically, not slowly. He simply stopped being upright, and then his back hit the canvas with a sound that went through the floor and up through the feet of 2,000 people and into the lighting rigs above. A deep, flat crack. The kind of sound that takes a second to process because the body registers it before the mind does. His eyes went wide, and the air left his lungs. Zara did not wait. Smooth and fluid the way water changes direction rather than stops. She came through the transition legs, wrapping his right arm, hips locked against his elbow back, arching, extending the joint to its limit. Juji Gatame. Textbook. No wasted motion. No adjustment. No hesitation. Brandon tried to roll. His hips were locked. He tried to stack her weight. Her hips were too deep, too tight, the angle wrong for every option he reached for. 3 seconds. 4. His face changed, the performance left it. And something real came in. Something that understood what was happening. 5 seconds. His free hand came off the mat and slapped it twice. Hard, quick, unmistakable. The referee was already moving. Tap, tap, stop. Zara released instantly, rolled away, stood up, brushed her knee. The clock on the official timer read 8 seconds. The hall was silent. Perfectly, completely silent. Not the silence of shock exactly, though that was part of it. The silence of 2,000 people recalibrating something. In the middle section, Keisha Washington stood up. Alone in the middle of the quiet, she put her hands together and started clapping. The person next to her looked at her for 1 second, then stood, then the row behind them, then slowly, unevenly, not a wave, but a tide with resistance in some sections and silence in others, where people sat with their printed signs and did not move enough of the hall, rose that the sound built from scattered applause into something sustained and real, something that traveled out through the live stream to 1,800 screens in 11 countries and meant something precisely because it had not been unanimous. Zara stood at the edge of the mat and did not raise her fists. She did not flex or shout or acknowledge the crowd with anything more than a single clean bow to the referee. She picked up her bag. She sat on the bench at the edge of the hall alone, her grandmother's hand wraps dark with sweat across both fists, and she breathed. Behind her, Brandon was still on the ground. The medics were beside him. His camera crew had stopped filming. His face was blank, in a way that had nothing to do with injury and everything to do with a man understanding, for the first time, what it feels like when the story you've been telling about yourself turns out to be wrong. Monday morning came the way. Monday mornings always came at the Riverside Community Health Clinic without ceremony, without acknowledgement that anything extraordinary had happened anywhere in the world, with only the requirement that the work begin. Zara clocked in at 5:30, changed into her scrubs in the staff bathroom, and was at her first patient's room by 5:42, blood pressure cuff in hand, the ordinary machinery of the day already running. She had kept her phone off since Saturday night. She had not watched the news, had not opened any social media, had not looked at the messages she knew were stacking up in every inbox she had. She had gone from the convention center to the dialysis center, sat with Ruth for an hour, driven home, and slept for 6 hours, the deepest 6 hours she could remember in months. She did not know yet that the bystander video of her throw had been on the internet for 36 hours, that it had 17 million views across platforms, that judo coaches in 5 countries had broken it down frame by frame, that her name had been the most searched term in American sports media for 2 days running. She found out at 8:15 when Todd texted her not to congratulate her just because that was how Todd operated. A screenshot of a headline: Black Belt files lawsuit against unknown female fighter, claims excessive force, illegal technique, intentional injury. Zara read it, standing in the hallway between rooms 2 and 3, a set of patient files under her left arm. She read it twice. Her hands did not shake, but something behind her eyes went very still. the way things go. Still, when the mind is running fast underneath a surface, it's keeping deliberately calm. Brandon Cole's attorney, a man named Stephen Hale, had issued a statement to 11 media outlets simultaneously at 6 that morning. The claims were specific that Zara had applied a choking technique not sanctioned by the competition rulebook, that she had maintained the armbar after the referee had signaled the stop, that she had held the submission with deliberate force beyond what was necessary or legal, resulting in ligament damage, requiring potential surgical intervention. None of it was true. But truth, Zara was learning in real time, has a slower news cycle than accusation. By 10 that morning, the edited video had been circulating for 4 hours. Curtis Brandon's manager had given it exclusively to a sports network the previous night, timed for maximum Monday morning reach. 4 seconds of footage, extracted from the final portion of the fight, the referee's voice track muffled in the edit, the frame cropped to obscure his position relative to the action. In the edit, it looked like Zara had held the lock for 3 full seconds after the tap. It looked like what the caption said, it was excessive force. By noon, the edited version had 40 million views, more than double the original. The comments had flipped. The hashtag had changed. What had been celebration was now something uglier, louder, and significantly less interested in accuracy. Zara did not see any of this until her lunch break, when Donna, who still came to work, who still sat 3 tables down in the break room, who met Zara's eyes with the specific quality of guilt that manifests as aggression, pushed her phone across the table without a word. Zara looked at the screen. She looked at Donna. She pushed the phone back, picked up her food, and went to eat in her car. Cal Whitmore, the Atlanta Combat Arts Invitational Director, released a statement on Wednesday morning from his office. It was careful and hedged, and deeply unsatisfying, in the way that statements written by lawyers trying to protect institutions from liability are always carefully hedged and deeply unsatisfying. The substance of it was this: given ongoing legal proceedings and questions raised about competition safety protocols, the awarding of all prizes was suspended pending internal review. The $10,000 was gone. The sponsorship contract gone. The deposit for Ruth's next procedure, which Zara had been building toward for 18 months, gone. In the time it took a lawyer to draft a paragraph. That evening, Zara drove to Mae's gym and sat on the mat in the dark. She didn't train. She just sat. Mae came in 20 minutes later, turned on the single overhead light, and sat across from her. Neither of them spoke for a long time, the building settling around them the way it always did, familiar and indifferent to what the people inside it were carrying. "They're going to bury me," Zara said finally. Her voice was flat, not angry, not close to tears, just empty in the way that happens when you've been running on purpose for so long that a sudden obstacle doesn't feel like a setback so much as a reckoning. "They're trying," Mae said. "There's a difference." Zara pressed her palms against her eyes. "I can't afford a lawyer, Mae." Mae was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her phone, dialed a number she did not look up, and set it on the mat between them on speaker. 3 rings. Then a voice sharp and warm at once, the kind of voice that had learned how to be both without sacrificing either. "Mae Greer," the voice said. "I've been waiting for you to call." Zara looked at Mae. Mae's expression had not changed. "I assume you saw the video," Mae said. "Both of them," the voice said. "The real one and the lie. That's exactly why I've been sitting by my phone since Sunday." Patricia Owens had graduated from the University of Georgia School of Law 15 years ago, with a civil procedure textbook full of highlighted passages and a clear-eyed understanding that the law, as a system, was a tool, and like all tools, its usefulness depended entirely on who was holding it and what they intended to build. She had spent the first 5 years of her career at a mid-size firm in Atlanta, learning how the tool worked in the hands of people who had been using it a long time and had refined it in their favor. Then she had left opened a 2-person practice in Riverside with a paralegal named Gerald and spent the next 10 years using the same tool to take apart the structures other people had built with it. Sports law, civil rights, the particular kind of case where someone with money and access had used both to silence someone who had neither. She was 38 years old, had never lost a case she'd chosen to take, and chose her cases with the specific discrimination of someone who understood that not every fight is worth having, and that the fights worth having deserve everything you have. She had taken on Zara's case before Zara knew she needed one. She had been watching the original video since Sunday afternoon, had pulled the Atlanta Combat Arts Invitational Rulebook and read it cover to cover, had identified 4 factual inaccuracies in Stephen Hale's public statement within 2 hours of its release, and had made a list of the documentation she would need that she was already most of the way through acquiring. When Mae called, Patricia had been sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the Hale statement open on her laptop, annotating it in red. She answered in one ring. What Zara did not know, sitting on the mat in Mae's gym, listening to this voice through a phone speaker, was that Patricia Owens had met Mae Greer exactly once before in a church basement in Riverside, 15 years ago, when Mae had offered a free 6-week self-defense course for women, and Patricia, 23 years old, first year of law school, had walked in because she had seen the flyer and thought she had nothing to lose. She had spent 6 Saturdays learning from Mae how to fall without getting hurt, how to use another person's momentum against them, and without either of them ever framing it this way, how to be in her body as something other than a target. It had changed the way she moved through rooms. She had never forgotten it. When Mae said, "I need you," Patricia had understood that she had been waiting a long time to hear exactly those words. "I'm not taking this for money," Patricia said to Zara, her voice level and direct, through the phone speaker. "I'm taking it because I have spent 15 years watching people like Brandon Cole use the legal system as a weapon against people who can't afford to defend themselves. I'm tired of watching that, and I'm good at stopping it." Zara said nothing. Her throat was closed. "I need you to do one thing," Patricia said. "Nothing. No interviews, no social media, no statements, no responses. Let them talk. Let them build the whole case on that edited video." Why? Zara said. Because Patricia said, and her voice dropped into the register of certainty, "I have the original. 3 angles, full timestamp, unedited from the venue's security archive. And when I play it next to theirs in front of a live feed in a room full of cameras, everyone is going to see exactly what they did." She paused. "But that's not even the best part." Zara looked at Mae. Mae had the expression she wore when she was not surprised, which was almost always, but when she had decided to let someone else have the moment. "I've been running background on Brandon Cole's academy," Patricia said. "I started pulling his records the day after the original video went up. I had a feeling this wasn't the first time. Elite Strike Atlanta location. Great website. Clean facility. And 3 injury complaints filed by former students in the past 2 years that were never reported to the Georgia Athletic Commission." She let that land. All 3 students were minors at the time of their injuries. All 3 were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements as a condition of any settlement. One of them, a 17-year-old who broke her wrist in a sparring drill, has already agreed to speak to me. The gym was completely quiet. 2 days before this hearing, Patricia continued, "Brandon Cole's team approached you in a parking lot and offered you $12,000 to sign an NDA and disappear." She paused. "You kept the paper they gave you. It wasn't a question." "Yes," Zara said. "Good," Patricia said. "Bring it Thursday." They have no idea what they walked into. The arbitration hearing was held on the following Thursday, 11 days after the fight. The earliest date the panel could convene, given the volume of documentation Patricia had requested, be entered into the record. In Conference Room B of the Peachtree Convention Center, the same building, different floor, the mats and banners replaced by a long table, 3 leather chairs for the arbitration panel, 2 opposing tables, arranged at right angles, and 52 credentialed press representatives seated in 3 rows along the wall. The hearing was live-streamed on 2 platforms. 250,000 people were watching before the first word was spoken. Brandon Cole arrived in a navy suit, his right arm in a sling, the same arm Zara had locked on Saturday. He walked slowly and carefully and made sure every camera caught both the sling and the slight wince when he sat down. Stephen Hale arrived with a briefcase that cost more than Zara's monthly rent and the particular composure of someone who had never been in a room he didn't control. He arranged his papers with practiced calm, uncapped a pen, and did not look at the other table. Patricia Owens arrived with a single brown folder. Zara arrived beside her in a plain black blouse, hair pulled back, no jewelry, hands folded in front of her. She sat down and did not look at Brandon. She looked at the three arbitrators at the center of the table, retired federal judge Harold Preston, and two colleagues from the State Athletic Commission with the same calm, level attention she brought to everything that mattered. Preston opened proceedings and nodded to Hale. Hale rose-buttoned his jacket and spoke with the fluency of someone who had delivered this kind of argument many times before. He laid out the claims in order: illegal technique, excessive force, intentional injury, credentials, misrepresentation. He played the edited video on the screen behind him, 4 seconds, the framing that made Zara look like the aggressor. He placed the medical report on the table, MRI showing inflammation in Brandon's elbow. He spoke with complete confidence because up until Sunday morning he had believed he was working with real evidence. Patricia stood up slowly. She didn't touch the folder. "Counselor," she said, "the video you just played." "How long is it?" Hale blinked. "Approximately 4 seconds." 4 seconds, Patricia repeated from an 8-second match. "So your entire case rests on exactly half of what actually happened." She crossed to the technician and handed him a USB drive. 3 camera angles. Full footage. Time-stamped by the venue's official security archive. She let the footage play twice. 3 synchronized views, every second clear. Brandon throwing the kick. Zara stepping inside. The throw. The transition. The tap at 6 seconds. Zara releasing at 7. The referee reaching them at 8. Patricia froze the frame. Miss Simmons released the submission 1 full second before the referee made physical contact. Not after. 1 second before. She turned to Hale. "Would you like to see them side by side?" Hale said nothing. She played them side by side. The difference was absolute. One was a clip designed to tell a story, the other was what happened. 250,000 viewers saw both simultaneously, and the comment section shifted so fast the moderation algorithms couldn't keep pace. Then Patricia opened the folder. She placed Zara's black belt certification on the table. United States Judo Federation, issued 6 years prior, verified and registered, signed by Mae Greer, licensed national instructor, 20-year Marine Corps veteran. She placed the venue's medical report from Saturday afternoon, Brandon Cole. No significant physical injury documented at time of examination, cleared within 20 minutes. She placed a signed declaration. The doctor Brandon's team had retained had contacted Patricia's office directly on Tuesday morning voluntarily, without solicitation, unwilling to attach his name to documentation he described as clinically inaccurate. His declaration stated, "The MRI shows minor inflammation consistent with a standard grappling impact. A finding of ligament damage requiring surgical intervention is not supported by the clinical evidence I reviewed." He had not been asked to come forward. He had simply decided he could not stay silent. Hale's pen, which had been tapping steadily against the table, stopped. Then Patricia placed the forgery. The fraudulent State Commission letterhead that had been sent to Cal Whitmore ordering the prize freeze. Patricia had obtained the original document through Cal Whitmore himself, who had driven to her office Tuesday afternoon, with it in a manila envelope and an expression on his face, like a man who understood he had been used and was not going to allow it to continue. Cal sat in the second row of the press section. He met Patricia's eyes briefly when she held up the document. The forgery was confirmed by a state documents examiner whose signed report was the last item in Patricia's folder. She placed it on the table. Then she turned to the final matter. "I'd like to introduce testimony that speaks to a pattern of conduct." Hale was on his feet. Objection outside the scope of these proceedings. It goes to credibility and intent, Patricia said calmly, and the panel has discretion. Preston looked at Hale for a long moment, then at Patricia. He nodded. Patricia read from two signed statements. Two former students of Brandon Cole's Atlanta Academy, both minors, at the time of their injuries, both pressured into NDAs with cash payments. Neither injury ever reported to the Athletic Commission. She read, without editorializing, without raising her voice in the same level register she had used throughout, which somehow made each sentence land harder than drama would have. When she finished reading, the room was silent, long enough to count. Then she looked at the panel, and then briefly at Brandon Cole. He was not looking at the sling on his arm anymore. He was looking at the table in front of him. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and whatever was on the screen reached his face before he could stop it. A small collapse at the corners of his mouth, something shutting down behind his eyes. He set the phone face down. "We request full dismissal of all claims against Miss Simmons," Patricia said. "And we reserve the right to pursue counterclaims for defamation, evidence tampering, and harassment." She closed the folder and sat down. Stephen Hale requested a recess. During the recess, an audio pickup near the respondent's table caught him leaning toward Brandon and saying, quietly but clearly, "I cannot continue to represent you on this basis." Brandon sat alone when the hearing resumed. Then Zara spoke. She had not spoken once during the preceding 2 hours. She had not moved except to breathe. When Preston acknowledged her, she looked at the panel and said in the voice she used at the clinic when she needed a frightened patient to understand something important, "I don't want to destroy him. I want him and everyone in this room to understand that people who look like me, who grew up where I grew up, who wear what I wear, deserve to be treated with respect. On the mat, at work, on the street, and in front of the law." She folded her hands. She sat back. Preston made a note. In the hallway afterward, Brandon passed her. His team was gone. The sling hung loose. His eyes were red at the edges. He stopped and opened his mouth. Zara looked at him, the same level, unhurried attention she had given him at the registration table. The mat, at every moment he had tried to make her look away. "I never wanted to humiliate you," she said. "You did that yourself." He stood there for a moment with his jaw tight and his shoulders dropped, and then he walked away down the empty hall, his footsteps echoing in a space that had no audience and no camera and no one watching, except the version of himself was now going to have to live with. The arbitration panel's ruling came Friday morning. Full dismissal, unanimous. Harold Preston read it on the live stream, 300,000 viewers, twice the previous day's count. Every claim against Zara Simmons thrown out. The edited video formally characterized as materially altered evidence. The matter referred to the Georgia State Bar for review of potential misconduct by counsel. In a final order, the panel addressed the documented pattern of conduct against junior athletes at Elite Strike Academy, a mandatory community reinvestment of $20,000 to be directed through a fund designated by Ms. Simmons as partial remedy for harm caused by the withdrawal of a previously pledged sponsorship. A pledge made publicly and documented in 3 press reports from 3 years prior. The panel further issued a formal recommendation that the Georgia Athletic Commission conduct a full licensing review of Elite Strike Academy and its affiliated programs. Cal Whitmore's prize freeze ordered lifted immediately, with an additional compensatory payment for reputational damages sustained during the suspension period, bringing the total awarded to Miss Simmons to $15,000. Preston set down the papers, looked into the camera, and said, "Every competitor who enters a sanctioned event deserves to be treated with equal dignity, regardless of background, regardless of appearance, regardless of who they know or don't know. That is not an aspirational standard. It is the baseline." He closed the folder. The stream's comment section moved too fast to read. Zara was in the dialysis center when Patricia called. Ruth was asleep in the treatment chair, the machine cycling beside her afternoon light, coming through the narrow window, and falling across the blanket on Ruth's lap. Zara answered on the second ring, listened, and then sat with the phone against her chest for a long moment. "It's done," Patricia said when Zara raised the phone again. "The money will be in the designated account by Monday morning." "Thank you," Zara said. It was all she had. Ruth's surgery was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The procedure took 4 hours. The surgeon came out to the waiting area, where Zara had been sitting since 6 in the morning with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched and a magazine she hadn't opened, and told her it had gone better than projected. Better than projected were the 3 best words Zara had heard in 2 years. When Ruth opened her eyes in the recovery room, Zara was in the chair beside the bed, in the same position she had been in 1,000 times before, and Ruth looked at her granddaughter's face, at the specific quality of lightness that had replaced something that had been there for a long time, and said, "You did it, didn't you, baby?" Zara nodded. Her throat wouldn't cooperate for anything more complicated than that. Ruth reached over and found her hand. Her grip was weak and real and everything. "I always knew you would," Ruth said. "I never doubted it for one single day." Brandon Cole's world did not end in one moment. It came apart in the particular way that things come apart when the structure was always more performance than foundation, gradually, then completely, then quietly. His primary sponsor sent the termination notice the afternoon of the hearing. 2 more followed by Friday. His YouTube channel lost 100,000 subscribers in 5 days. The podcast episode where he had laughed into the microphone and promised to finish her in 8 seconds was replayed 40 million times, but the comments now read like the record of a man watching himself get something very badly wrong. The 3 former students whose NDAs had been mentioned at the hearing went public in the week after the ruling. 4 more came forward within 10 days. The Georgia Athletic Commission opened a formal investigation. Elite Strike Academy's liability insurance was revoked. By the end of the month, the doors were closed permanently. Donna Reeves was dismissed from Southern Star Distribution Center 2 weeks after the hearing following an internal review of the locker photographs and the account that had purchased and published them. Brandon posted a final video. 30 seconds, no music, no filter, no gold-stitched uniform. He said he was stepping away. He did not say her name. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in October, Keisha Washington sat on the front steps of a building on Clement Street in Riverside with her laptop open, finishing the last paragraph of a piece that had taken her 3 months to report and write, and that a national sports magazine had bought for the cover. The title was, "Who Gets to Compete?" The subheading was, "How Amateur Martial Arts Organizations Systematically Exclude the Athletes They Claim to Welcome, and What One 8-Second Fight Changed." In the acknowledgments section at the bottom of the final page, she wrote, "For Zara Simmons, who stood up so I could write. And for the girl in the front row, you know who you are, even if you don't yet." Inside the building, through a door with no large sign, but a small bronze plaque that read Greer Simmons Community Defense Center, 16 girls stood in 2 rows on new mats. Ages 12 to 17, plain white uniforms, bare feet. Mae stood in the doorway with her arms folded, watching with the quiet that meant she was satisfied, which was different from the quiet that meant she was waiting. And Zara had learned to tell them apart. Zara stood in front of the 16 girls. She looked different in a way that was hard to name, not larger, not louder, just settled, the way someone looks when they have found the place they are supposed to be and stopped arguing with themselves about it. The $20,000 from Brandon Cole's court-ordered community sponsorship had funded the new mats, the equipment, the insurance, and a small scholarship for girls who couldn't afford gear. No one in the room except Zara and Mae knew where the money had come from. They had never discussed whether to say, "Some things are more useful as foundation than as story." First thing Zara said. Her voice was the same voice she had used at the registration table, at the mat, at the hearing in Ruth's hospital room, the voice that took up exactly as much space as it needed to, and not 1 inch more. "This is not about hurting people. This is about knowing all the way down in your bones that nobody can make you feel small unless you let them." In the front row, a girl, 13 thin arms crossed tight across her chest, in the way of someone who has learned to be armor for herself, raised her hand. What if they're bigger than you? Zara looked at her. Really looked. She recognized something in the posture, in the particular quality of the question, in the way the girl held herself, like she had asked this question before in other rooms, and hadn't gotten an answer she could use. They will be, Zara said. Almost always. That's not the point. What's the point? Zara walked to the front row and crouched down to the girl's eye level, not talking down, at level. The point, she said, is that you get back up every time, no matter what they say, no matter what they do. You get back up. And eventually she held the girl's eyes. They run out of ways to keep you down. The girl uncrossed her arms. Just slightly, just enough. Mae didn't say a word. Outside, the sun was moving through the early October sky over Riverside, Georgia, and the building on Clement Street still had no large sign on the door, and the paint was still peeling off the east wall, and the mats inside were new, and the door was open, and 16 girls were learning what it meant to stand. If this story hit something in you, drop a like and subscribe so the next one finds you when you need it. Tell me in the comments which moment stayed with you, and where in the world are you watching from?